Hi, and welcome back in. As you're building out your van, you're going to run into things that you may not know how to do. I mean, that's just perfectly normal. And a lot of folks that are building vans aren't builders. I've been a builder for a long time. I've done a lot of work with my hands. And there are some skills that you really need to have in a van, and there are some shortcuts that you can really use in a van that will make your life a lot easier that someone without a lot of experience may not be aware of, and not knowing those things may make things very intimidating. So as I go through my build, I want to share some of those shortcuts that I know and some of the tricks that I know about how to fit things together, because nothing in the van is straight or true, and there's some easy things to do. Today I'd like to share with you a duplicating fence. 10 minutes, some scrap lumber, and you're going to save yourself hours. Come on with me. I'll show you how it works.
Holy cow, what a low energy intro that was. In any event, welcome to vanofaction.com, where we're taking a 2018 Dodge ProMaster van and converting it to a family camper. Tonight, we're talking about a shortcut for woodworking, not just for vans. This will be something handy for anyone who ever needs to cut an odd-shaped piece of wood. So come on along. Please subscribe, please like, and please share. We're glad to have you.
Well, we've been fighting with this van from day one, trying to work around the fact that things aren't straight or square. Nothing's flat, nothing's level, nothing's plumb. And we've been using all kinds of different tricks to make sure that the things lined up right, that things were parallel, that the optics were right when you got there. But as you go along and as you get closer and closer to finishing, there's going to be times when you just simply have to cut a couple of pieces of wood that are just odd pieces of wood. There won't be any square corners on them at all. They'll meet at different angles. It just makes it a challenge. It makes it a real challenge. So it's time to build a new piece of equipment. If you had a shop that was full of all kinds of fancy woodworking stuff, there's a lot of different tools you could get to do this. But I don't have that. I'm doing this whole build with a table saw and a drill. I'm not complaining. That's all a person really needs. But I've reached a point now where instead of just having to try and cut a piece of wood straight so I can use my table saw fence, I got to cut a couple of pieces now that are tapered. And some of these pieces that are tapered are going to have a 45 degree or a 22 degree angle milled on them as well. It becomes a bit of a challenge. It's time to build a duplicating fence. It's time to invest 10 minutes and some scrap lumber into a tool, a piece of equipment that every woodworker should have hanging on their garage wall or their shop wall. I've had a duplicating fence for over 40 years, so every table saw I've ever had. In this particular instance, this isn't my saw. It came with this shop that I rented in British Columbia, and so I got to make things work. But a duplicating fence is a phenomenal piece of equipment. Let me show you. This is the typical duplicating fence construction. This is the fence that came with the saw, the table of the saw, and the blade. And all we're trying to do is move our fence away from the blade, but still have an edge to run along. So what I've done is, what I would normally do is take two scrap pieces of lumber, as long as they were perfectly straight, screw them together in this T-shape. Now, that T-shape gets clamped to the fence and held still. The critical dimension is right here. This space should be just a little bit thicker than the wood you're trying to mill. Maybe an eighth of an inch greater, that's all. The saw blade should be set so it's just high enough to cut the wood you're trying to mill. That's what I would normally build. It would take about 10 minutes and it would last a lifetime. Unfortunately, because this isn't my saw, this particular saw has a very eensy-weensy little square fence, and I don't have enough height to be able to get my clamp above that guide. There's not enough room. So I've modified the design a little bit, and let me show you. And we are back. I hope you can hear me okay. In order for me to use my table saw, I have to have my shop doors open. That's just how tight spaces are, and it's really windy here today. So I hope you can hear me all right. But this is the modification that I made to my fence. As I was starting to put it together, I thought I'll cut these holes out for my clamp to slide down below this piece. Normally they would be sticking up and I'd clamp it higher than the guide, but that'll work. The only issue with this is if I get a really wide piece of wood underneath there, the clamp might be in the way. That might be something I have to deal with. I could make this piece wider if I wanted to. However, this is just the size of scrap that I had, and that's what it is. 10 minutes, some scrap lumber, and what you've done is you have effectively bought a whole new piece of equipment. Probably 9 times out of 10, this scrap lumber duplicating fence will replace a jointer for you. How can it do that? Well, it'll cut odd shaped pieces of wood, no question. And if you were doing something where you had 15 or 20 pieces the same, but they were all not square, you could make one pattern and make them all identical. Easy peasy, nothing to it. But if you were doing some laminating, if you wanted to make a tabletop and you had 5 or 6 pieces of wood that you wanted to put together and they were crooked like this, look how crooked that piece is. Now you can't do it with plywood, but if this was a 1x4 or something and it had a big curl in it, you could take that curl out of the wood with a duplicating fence. One pass. Traditionally, a cabinet maker would use a jointer for that and keep passing it over the jointer over and over and over again until it became straight. Well, with a duplicating fence, one pass, it's done. Now, the only critical part of this is that, as I said earlier, the piece you want to cut has to slide under the fence by a little bit. The blade of the saw is set up just a little bit above the thickness of the wood you're trying to cut. I may have to put the phone down for this part. Now, the duplicating fence couldn't be easier. We've got it clamped nice and solid to the existing fence of the table saw. No issues. We slide our fence over until the outside edge of the wooden fence lines up with the outside edge of the table saw. We want the saw under the fence. Line them up, clamp it down, we're set to go. This is the piece we want to cut. So our off cut is going to be under the fence, right? That's how that's going to work. It's going to be sliding under the fence. So what we need is a guide to slide along the fence to make sure it follows properly. Another piece of wood with a straight edge. It's all it takes. Now, we have to get it so that this piece of wood doesn't slide on this piece of wood. You could do it with Velcro, you could do it with sandpaper, you could do it with two-sided tape. Truthfully, what I found to be easiest and most effective is 2 finishing nails, just sticking out a little bit. And we line it up on our line, and we're ready to make the cut. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the black line so we can see how well this works.
Once you're set, just have faith in what you've done. A nice, careful, steady push along that fence. You can't see your saw blade, but that's absolutely okay. You know exactly where it is, and you just push past it. It's really that easy. Now, once you take a look at this when we pull the board off, look how straight that saw cut is along the black line. You can do this over and over and over again. Nothing to it. Now, this setup is for small pieces of wood, but you can do, and I have done, pieces up to 16 feet long exactly the same way. The setup just changes a little bit in terms of how strong it has to be, and otherwise it's exactly the same thing. Now, in this board I'm cutting an odd-shaped piece for around the window. It's not parallel on any side, and it has a 45-degree corner on one side of it. Simple. Once you've got your layout done, you push it through. You've made a compound angled cut, and it couldn't be easier. Enjoy this, folks. This will really save you time and make you look like an expert. Hope you've enjoyed it. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and share. Be well.